All right, the other one is the outside funding of co-curricular programs. So we gave you on the 29th a copy to look at. Staff has looked at this and came back with their recommendations.
We'd like to have you discuss this just based off of what we drafted and edited the form. I think this is one of those issues like Tim had mentioned earlier, Mr. Walsh had mentioned earlier. I think we should use some discussion tonight and we could maybe work to approve this or take action on this at the August 9th business meeting.
The clubs don't start before school starts, right? Unlike sports, right?
I don't think,
Correct.
Pam,
Okay.
I think SA is the only one to start before school, right?
And that's not,
That one's not being
that's not
affected.
affected, so, yeah, they are meeting.
Any other questions, concerns, given what you had in your board packet on this?
I just got to ask a question. Now that Matt went to trouble and we looked at this, it seems like it's going to be an awfully hard thing to, I've got three fundamental kind of ideas, and I don't know what to write. One is what Mike said. For cutting things, we're cutting things, and there's people in the audience even have said, if the community doesn't want to pay for it, why are we going to let it be self-funded? I'm just telling you philosophically, I don't know which way is the best way to go. The second thing is, it leaves the idea like you could kind of pick and choose which ones to cut or not cut, depending upon whether you think somebody could fund it, or you don't want somebody to fund it, or want them to have to fund it. And the third thing is, even the way, not that it's not pretty well laid out how to do this, it's going to be I could see some nightmares actually trying to collect. You know, if they underestimate the budget, then they owe $1,000. How are you going to go collect the money from them? I mean, I guess you can divide it amongst the students and
One of the
put a
key
rock
things
on
for
it, but-
when I submitted this was that everybody up front would know what, so so math club comes up and says, I want to do this. They up front would know what the budget is for that school year. Both, so if the school can't come up and say, guess what, your budget is $3,000. Oh, and then halfway through the year, you know what, I forgot this. Everybody signs off on this is what the budget would be, this is when you need to have the money by. And the reason why we put this in was, and we talked about this, is we have people that are interested of clubs that we cut.
I understand.
That are revenue neutral and won't cost any expenses. The key thing I want to do is upfront communications and continuing communication saying, okay, this is what our budget is, we've received the money for that, we are spending it in a separate account just to make sure that you have that. So that's the only thing.
Pam and I, when we met, we shared some of the same thoughts you did.
But overall, you're recommending
Well,
this, though?
that's why we want to discuss it.
Okay.
That's why we kind of put the brakes on. Pam spent a lot of time looking at it again. We had to put some language in there that clearly stated that the money had to be handed in 30 days prior to a club beginning. We also talked about you cannot have somebody front that money and then go to all the club members and say, hey, it's going to be $52 a kid, because then what do you do with the free and reduced lunch kids and the integrity of their privacy and confidentiality? So we think we covered a majority of that in here, and Pam did an excellent job going through it a second time and a third time. But those are some of the things, and Pam, if you want to add on to that, some of the things we discussed, but that's what we were concerned about.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there are philosophical implications that need to be discussed, and that's why we just wanted to present you with our draft of what Mr. Cindy presented, and give you time to digest it, so we don't have to decide. The August meeting is plenty of time to make a decision on that.
And you did some research, but Matt, do we know if there's very many schools that allow this self-funded clubs?
I
Does
am
anybody
not
know?
aware.
The research I did mostly was focused on participating. I didn't go back and say what, you know what I mean?
I understand.
In my experience, I have seen it go as far as to pay for additional coaches,
That's what, that would be
but
the
I have
next
not
thing.
seen to pay for, like, hey,
What if-
one school's going to have cheerleading and another's not.
Well, that's another problem I have. What if the families who have divers come and say, I'll pay for a diving coach? I mean, if we do it for math club, should we do it for a
Would
sport?
that be an issue though, or if we said, per the stipend schedule, it would be $3,000,
Okay.
you know what I mean? As long as we keep within the letter of the contract, and everybody knows upfront what the costs are, and we follow, you know what I mean? It has to be communication to follow through and accounted wise.
Pam, do you want to share what some of your concerns would be with that?
Well, I mean, there are philosophical challenges with that. I mean, I have seen this done in my district that I live in Lamont for the feeder district, but the funds were raised by kind of like a foundation like you have here, that the parents got together and raised funds, and then it supported, you know, then the school made the decisions on what to support. So then you have kind of, it's a special interests, or people who have the money that happen to be attached to that club are able to support that club, and other people who are as passionate but perhaps don't have the funds in a different club don't get to. And so then there are, and we did have some people that came and talked to the board and addressed this school then becoming, you know, I mean, we are a school that's going to have some clubs and nots, but it's more of those who have access to things or opportunities come from the financially wealthier families than the ones that don't. And that was a concern that was expressed by some parents and community members as well. So philosophically, the board has to discuss what the implications are and what they're comfortable with doing, and what might be the unforeseen consequence of that, or, you know, the result of doing that. It does have some implications.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think I would need some weeks to think about this. I think it's a slippery slope, because right now, looking down the road, if we do not have either reduction in expenditures or increase in income for this next year, there'll be no sports or no clubs, is what the proposal is out there looming on the future. And then what do we do if a person in the community comes up and says, I will pay $100,000 to put a football team on the field? What will we do if that scenario would present itself? If we tell the community we're going to do one thing, and something like that football, and I just picked football because it was listed first for no other reason. You know, what are we as a board going to do? I do agree that whatever we do, it's got to be done all up front, and it's got to be all taken care of, and cross your T's, dot your I's, make sure we're covered for liability purposes, and make sure we have the funding on hand to pay the stipend that we're contractually obligated to pay for that particular activity, and that we can't go over budget on anything with that. But I think, you know, I don't know, because next year is a whole different, the way it looks now. It's a whole different situation where all activities, co-curricular, sports, everything is going to be off the table for the kids if there isn't something to rectify the budget.
All right, so we're going to hold this back, look at it. If there develop your questions, identify any issues, and we'll talk about it in the August meeting. Okay? And then Pam, you can do some research to see if somebody, what Lamont had out there, if there's any issues.
Is there any other issues or things that you want the building administration to look at now so that we have a few weeks? Or if you do, please email those to me and I will forward them out, or I will work on them with Pam.
If there's an easy way for you to do a little survey to see how many other,
Yeah,
who else does it, if anybody,
You said Lamont does it, so take.
for grammar schools, right?
Yeah, and I can speak to a little bit of the challenges they had in sustaining that from year to year.
Okay.
It's got the issue of sustainability, going to the same people and continue to ask, you know, so
Okay.
it is challenging, but.
And I also think during our retreat, we're going to have the conversation philosophically. You know, philosophically, we might need to have the conversation, what portion of a budget should sports take? Or philosophically, what do clubs do? You know, who comes to the clubs? Are those the kids that can't get into the class? Are they an important part of high school? And philosophically, what portion, to what extent would we support them? This year will be a patch no matter what until we have that conversation. Our club's an important augmentation of this curriculum. We need to have that conversation.
And I guess the other thing I would ask Kevin is, I don't get a strong feeling that this is something that the administration is actually recommending. So I think we need to know stronger one way or the other, whether this is something the administration recommends or not.
The outside funding of the
Yeah.
co-curricular programs.
We
Yeah.
spent the,
We-
being together now 8 days, we, this drove a lot of our conversation.
That's fair
Isn't that
enough.
long?
I'm not putting you, we're gonna talk about it next time, but I
Yeah.
really,
Yeah, but
I
like how
think that's
this-
important.
We thought this
Yeah.
presented some ways that could find us in a trick bag.
Okay.
So we wanted to look at it more and hear
Yeah.
more from the board before we did more legwork on that.
Okay.
Because
Right.
we always want to provide opportunities for the kids, and, you don't get a second shot at a senior year or a junior year, and if you've been part of a club for 3 years, you want the kid to have a great experience. But maybe we could save it this year, and next year, if someone's parents don't step up and fund it. So there's a lot,
Okay.
Tim, that
Okay,
we got to really look at.
that's fair.
Okay, the next thing on old business, which.
Wait, can I just,
Yeah.
but Tim's and Kevin, since you've been just talking about this now, I just want to say something for this year, because we have alluded to, that we may allow funding of clubs for families who have come to all these meetings all summer. I think we got to be real careful that what we do this year, maybe they haven't come because they believe that, because we've always alluded to that
Right.
it may happen.
Right.
I just want to put that on the table.
I agree. And I think we gotta look at it, because we've had people that have had interest in it, so.
And they have come many times.